The iPhone Air might just be the most premium feeling iPhone I've ever used, but it's full of compromises, and the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max are better in almost every way on paper. So then why would anybody consider the iPhone Air over the iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max, especially for such a small price difference? Well, I've been searching for that answer myself, and I think I've found it after using both the iPhone Air and the iPhone 17 Pro Max for the past few days, each with an active SIM in them. And I'll tell you right now, this is the first year ever where I've just not been sold on the Pro or Pro Max. So let's talk about it. So let's start with the obvious here. The iPhone Air is impossibly thin and light. It's even thinner than the Samsung S25 Edge, which I was blown away with earlier this year. Meanwhile, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is a chunky thing, and it's about 41% heavier than the Air. And when you throw both of these in your pocket or when you hold them up in the air at night when you're, doom scrolling in your bed, the difference is significant. And I'll tell you that the weight is one thing, but I think the thinness is actually more important to me personally than the weight, because it kind of dictates how I grip and hold and maneuver the phone throughout the day. And when I say that, I mean when I'm on the phone, when I'm carrying my phone around, when I'm on FaceTime, when I'm watching a video, like I could just hold it like this, like with my fingers like that. I could never really do that with the Pro or Pro Max. And when I hold it up to my ear when I'm on the phone, like I feel so much more fatigue with the Pro and Pro Max specifically, than the iPhone Air. So it really just changes like the way that I use my phone in a way. Now the iPhone Air does have the same display as the 17 Pro and Pro Max, but it's 6.5 inches compared to the Pro's 6.3 inches and the Pro Max 6.9 inch display. So clearly you can see more content on the Pro Max and social media apps and things like that. And you also have a larger viewing area when watching videos. And by the way, when watching videos, something I noticed pretty shortly after using the Air was the speaker. Yes, singular, because the Air only has one speaker right here in the earpiece. There's no bottom speaker, so it's mono, not stereo sound. Meanwhile, the 17 Pro Max has two speakers and stereo sound, so the sound quality is immediately, noticeable when listening to music, especially when you go over 60% volume. I noticed quite a bit of distortion in the speaker on the Air, but here's the thing. I personally don't listen to music a lot out loud, like on my external speaker on my iPhone in general. So that was never a huge deal to me. But I will say that when watching videos, when watching TikToks, Instagram Reels, things like that, there's not a huge difference in the sound quality between the two. Like, yes, clearly the iPhone, pretty much every other iPhone has better sound quality than the iPhone Air. But unless you're really comparing them, it's not going to be a huge deal. Like, it never bothers me on a daily basis when I'm watching a video on my iPhone Air. Unless I'm holding it in, landscape mode, then sometimes it does cover up the speaker. Like my thumb will cover up the speaker a little bit, which that can be pretty annoying. But overall, I think this is kind of overblown by a lot of people, unless you're somebody who listens to music a lot and you put it up at max volume a lot, or like more than 60% volume a lot. So for me, not a deal breaker. And something else small that I noticed is the haptic feedback is not as strong on the iPhone Air. Again, not a huge deal. I don't even use it for typing, so I don't really feel it as often as some other people might, but that's something I did want to mention. And that dynamic island up top. So this is another thing I noticed pretty quickly, and it's a very specific thing. You may not even notice it, but it does sit a tad bit lower on the screen compared to the Pro and Pro Max. And it kind of threw me off at first, but I did get used to it, especially when I was outdoors in the direct Florida sun and the Air got and stayed just as bright as the Pro Max. And that's crazy because I had to be at the full 3000 nits of peak brightness. I was under intense sunlight and they both dimmed around the same time, which really surprised me. And the reason it surprised me is because, yes, they have the same display, but the Pro and Pro Max have the new vapor chamber cooling system and it's built from that aluminum unibody versus the titanium on the iPhone Air. So the iPhone Air not only, is more heat prone because of the materials used, but it also doesn't have the vapor chamber cooling system. So I was pretty impressed, honestly, with the Air at heating and kind of dimming around the same time as the Pro Max. Now, that didn't happen every time. There were a few instances where the Air did dim, much before, like 10 minutes before the Pro and Pro Max. But in that one instance, the first time I used it, it was about the same time. And by the way, can we just take a moment to admire the beauty of the iPhone Air? I mean, this phone got so many compliments and questions when I was out with it. I had a couple of people ask me if this is the new iPhone or if it's like a Samsung phone. They were generally, just genuinely confused about what phone this was because it was such a different form factor than anything Apple has done before. And I have to say, people are very excited and enthusiastic about this phone, a lot more than I was anticipating. And although the titanium borders of the Air do look incredible, it is such a fingerprint magnet no matter what color you get. Meanwhile, the Pro Max has that aluminum look and feel, which honestly looks a lot less premium than the Air, but it doesn't get as smudgy and as messy. You don't have to clean it as often. Okay, so you guys know every year there's a new gate for iPhones, and this year it's Scratch Gate, where the back of the phones and the sides of the phones, specifically the Pros and the Airs, are scratching really easily. And me personally, I've not had any experience with any of my phones scratching, and I've been using them without a case the majority of the time just to test the durability, so I'm not saying it's overblown online, but I just personally have not experienced it. I'm sure it is a real thing, so you might want to have a case, but for me, I've had no issues with durability on any of my phones. And it's not like I'm just using it in my studio. I've been out and about every single day with this phone. I put it in pockets, I put it on hard surfaces, I've let other people hold it, rings have hit against the back and the sides of it, and there's really nothing to show for it on the Air or on the Pro Max. Okay, so now we have to talk about one of the two most important things with the iPhone Air, and that is the battery life. And look, the iPhone Air is never going to get as good a battery life as the Pro iPhones. I don't care what the spec sheet says and how Apple says it's the same as the 16 Pro on paper. In my experience, it did not get as good a battery life as the 16 Pro. That was my daily phone last year. And I think that's why Apple released a MagSafe battery pack to go along with the iPhone Air. So this is a $100 battery pack that could get you like to the 16 Pro levels and like the 17 Pro levels, but it's kind of bulky and it's $100. But thankfully our sponsor TORRAS has a more compact and affordable option that's not just exclusive to the iPhone Air. And we'll talk about that after we discuss my new favorite plug-in charging block, the TORRAS FlexLine 67 watt retractable charger. It's not only super compact for being 67 watts, but the 1 meter retractable cord is so clutch because now you don't have to worry about cables being too short, and when you're done, it retracts back neatly so there are no messy cables and wires in your bag or on your desk. And plus it's 67 watts, so it's more than enough to fast charge the 17 series from 0 to 50% in 20 minutes. It's actually 30% for the Air, but it can easily charge two devices at the same time as well, like my 17 Pro Max and my MacBook Air, all without overheating thanks to the smart temperature control and adaptive power adjustment. And then we have that mini mag power bank I was talking about. So this is a tiny little 5,000 milliamp hour battery pack that you can use to charge wired at 18 watts or wirelessly via MagSafe at 7.5 watts. And it's made of aluminum, not that cheap plastic, so it does feel premium while also being so compact and lightweight that it's going to fit into basically any pocket. So if you want to pick up one of these charging solutions from TORRAS, be sure to use my link down in the description below. So yeah, everybody knows that the iPhone 17 Pro Max is going to get better battery life than the iPhone Air, but just how much better is it actually? And is it actually worth the added bulk and thickness of the Pro Max? Well, to be honest, I've used the iPhone Air for a few days straight, and while it hasn't lasted all day like Apple claims, I did only have to charge it up once each of those days. And guess what? I had to charge up the Pro Max once each of those days as well. And like I mentioned earlier, I do have an active eSIM on both of these. My main SIM though is in the Air. So yeah, the Air lasted me from around 9 a.m. to about 5 p.m. I would say, whereas the Pro Max lasted from 9 a.m. to about 8 to 9 p.m. sometimes. So clearly the Pro Max lasts a good bit longer, but I still had to charge it. I still got down to that 20% level and I had to charge it. So, it was just at a different time frame. But here's the thing for me, and I always say this, but I'm always around chargers, I'm always around wires. So if I have to charge one phone up once a day, it doesn't really matter when it is if I'm always around chargers. Like, unless I'm traveling and I'm in the mountains and, I don't have a battery pack with me, which I'm always gonna have a battery pack with me anyways, you know what I mean? Like, if you're always around chargers, it doesn't really matter if you have to charge a phone up before like another one. You're still gonna have to charge it up once per day. But I guess if you value having your battery last longer throughout the day and you don't like charging until maybe you get back from work or something like that, then yes, the Pro Max, if that's like your top priority, then just get the Pro Max and call it a day. Otherwise, you're gonna be disappointed in the iPhone Air for running out of battery before you get home from work, for example. Okay, so if the battery life isn't the biggest compromise to the Air in my eyes, then what is? And to me, it's very clear, it's very obvious, and that is the camera on the back. That is by far the biggest compromise you're making with the iPhone Air over even the base 17 but especially over the Pro and Pro Max. So this is a single 48 megapixel fusion lens. It's the same lens as on the base 17, and it's called fusion because it uses pixel binning to give you zoom options like the 2x that you see here. But there's no true telephoto lens on this phone for those crispy optical zooms, and there's also no ultra-wide lens for those 0.5x wide angle shots. I just find myself using the telephoto lens more than the ultra-wide lens these days, and take a look at this. When I'm shooting at 2x, the Air is honestly just fine, and it's not too far off from the Pro Max in terms of quality, but any more than that, and the Pro Max just completely dominates the Air. Like, especially when you go all the way in on the zoom, it's so much better on the Pro and Pro Max. But, you know, how often are you really zooming in on photos like that? Like, how much on a daily basis are you really doing that? For me, it's not very often, but it might be for you. But I have to say, the biggest missed opportunity of the iPhone Air is the lack of Pro formats. So we cannot shoot photos in Pro RAW, and we cannot shoot videos in ProRes, both of which I use multiple times a week. So that is a huge con for the iPhone Air. And to me, this is the biggest potential deal breaker of the iPhone Air, more than really anything else, because I shoot a lot of B-roll with my iPhone, and if I can't use ProRes to shoot that B-roll, like, the quality will look okay, but it will not be near as crispy as that ProRes log. So if you create content, honestly, I would not even consider the iPhone Air. I would just pick up the iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max and call it a day and just deal with the added bulk. But if you're more of a hobbyist with photos and videos, and you just like to take shots that, you know, only you keep, you don't really publish a lot online, and even if you do, you don't care about the best quality, then that might be just fine having the iPhone Air with that single camera lens. But as for the front-facing camera, it is the exact same on the Air and on the Pros, and also on the base model 17. So we have that brand new 18 megapixel center stage camera, which is actually pretty amazing because it auto zooms in and out based on the people in the frame. We also have that square sensor now, so it shoots in portrait and landscape, you know, based on how many people are in the frame. It does also follow you around to keep you in frame when you're on a FaceTime call, for example. So really the only added benefit you're getting with the Pros is on the rear facing cameras. Now, if you're somebody who transfers files a lot between iPhone to like an SSD or iPhone to your computer, you have to know that there's also a big con with the Air here. So the Air is still limited to USB 2 speed, so 480 megs a second, while the Pro Max supports USB 3.2 Gen 2 for data transfer speeds up to 10 gigs a second. So a massive difference in file transfer speeds. Oh, and by the way, speaking of the USB-C cable, I had a really weird experience that I'm not sure if anybody else has had with the iPhone Air when I went to charge it using my desktop charger here. I had a case on at the time because I was trying out different cases, and I tried to charge my phone and it wouldn't even fit through the case because this thing is so thin, this cable would not even go through my case. I had to take off the case to be able to charge my phone. So I guess that's something else to consider if you have an iPhone Air and you're planning on using a case. You might want to, you know, take off the case when you charge, which can be really annoying. But I have to tell you right now that using a case almost ruins the iPhone Air. Like, I've used the Apple bumper case and I've used other cases as well, and it really takes away from the magic of the iPhone Air. So, you know, me personally, I will not be going with a case at all on this phone, no matter how far into the future I go. Now, as far as performance differences between the 17 Pro Max and the iPhone Air, they both have the A19 Pro chip inside, but the 17 Pro Max has a 6-core GPU, while the Air is limited to a 5-core GPU. And if you pair that extra core on the Pro Max with the vapor chamber cooling system inside, the Pro Max is going to perform a good bit better when it comes to intensive tasks like gaming, exporting videos, or editing and exporting photos in Lightroom. And that example is actually where I noticed the first difference in performance between the Air and the Pro Max is when I was editing photos and exporting them in Lightroom. That process was noticeably quicker on the Pro Max. And that's where I was like, man, should I really be using the iPhone Air? Because these tasks that I do all the time are kind of slower on the Air. So I have to say, performance, it is noteworthy, and it is like something you notice if you're doing those intensive tasks. If you're not doing things like that, it's going to be pretty hard to tell a difference in performance between these two if you're just going into social media apps and texting people and things like that. And speaking of that vapor chamber cooling system and the overall heat, I have to say that the iPhone Air gets consistently much more warm than the iPhone 17 Pro, and especially the 17 Pro Max when I've been using it every single day. But the weird thing is, the 17 Pro Max, I can feel the warmth when I'm like holding it normally like this, which by the way, it doesn't really get very warm at all. Like the Air gets significantly more warm to the touch. But it's weird because with the iPhone Air, the heat is coming more towards the top, whereas on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, it's more just kind of in the middle. And that's because a lot of the internal, structure of the Air is more top center, like it's more top heavy, I should say. So you'll feel the heat the higher up you go go to the camera plateau, and especially if you hold it in landscape mode, you will feel it a lot on your hands, but that is something I did want to mention as far as heat goes. Okay, so with all that being said, here's the thing. So the iPhone Air is simply not for like the spec nerd, somebody who's going to compare this phone to everything else and talk about its compromises, what it's missing, things like that. That's not who's buying the iPhone Air. Those people already decided on the base model or one of the Pros. So then you might be asking, then who exactly is the iPhone Air for? I believe it's for people who value practicality, who value simplicity, and how it makes them feel on a daily basis. And it's not in a monetary way where they think about every little compromise it has. The 17 Pro and Pro Max is for people who value features and capabilities over the form and the daily usability. And since there's only a small gap in price between the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max and the iPhone Air, it really just comes down to what you prefer, form or function. And at this point, we can't fully have both, so you have to choose one, form or function. As for me, and this was not an easy decision by the way, but I've decided that I will be using the iPhone Air as my main phone for the foreseeable future. And the thing is, I value form more than function outside of my content creation. I'm just gonna carry a second Pro phone with me most days. Obviously, that's not something a normal person would do, but that's what I plan on doing, just so I can at least still have, those cameras. But for me, every single day, like when I'm walking around the house, when I'm going on a walk, when I'm going on a trip, like I just value the feel of this phone in the hand. It's also different. It makes me feel like I'm using something futuristic, and it's just in my pockets. It's not a brick. I can put it in anywhere. The way I hold it, there's no fatigue. There's just something to it where I just value that outside of monetary wise more than, the cameras on the back, except for when I'm shooting content. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's kind of a cop out for me to say that, but that's just the honest truth at this point. And now, will my decision change in the future? Possibly. We'll see. I'm really curious to see how the battery is actually going to last on the iPhone Air, if it's still going to be this good in 6 months from now. So I will have to revisit that. So I encourage you, if you've not at least picked up and tried the iPhone Air, you should try it so you can see what I mean, because you won't be able to tell any other way. So hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. It was definitely not a comparison I was anticipating on making before these phones came out. And even when they came out, I didn't expect it, but I just really was surprised to find myself using the Air more than the Pro Max. So you guys let me know in a comment down below your thoughts. I'm sure some people will disagree with me because it's not things that you could actually see on, the spec sheet, but hey, these are my honest thoughts, and I just want to give it to you guys raw and honest. So let me know your thoughts. If you have one of these phones, leave a comment down below with your overall thoughts on them. And if you plan on getting one, hopefully this video helped you out. Let me know if it did. But anyways, guys, I will be doing another long-term review on the Air to see if this actually holds up in like 6 months from now. So we'll see. Make sure you guys are subscribed for that. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.